What's up, guys, and welcome to Gamescript. On this episode, I'm going to be looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens. This is a game where the Ravens are going to be resting most of their starters, and Pittsburgh should seemingly win this game. And the last time we had Pittsburgh on a showdown slate, I recommended Mason Rudolph in the passing game. But what are we going to do with them this week? There is a ton of value in current underdog playoff best ball ADP. Elite offenses like the Rams are easy to stack. Take advantage of uncertainty and start drafting now. Use the promo code SEEK for up to a $100 match on your first deposit. And subscribe to Heat Seeker Sports on YouTube for underdog strategy and drafting shows. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. This is an episode where I'm going to be looking at the Baltimore Ravens versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a game the Ravens should seemingly lose because they're resting all their starters and Pittsburgh has something to play for. They are playing for a playoff spot. If Pittsburgh wins and Buffalo loses, they're basically in. I think there's a couple other scenarios, but that's the easiest way that they can get in. But they need to win this game. They're playing against a division opponent. We're looking at a 34.5-point total with Baltimore as 3.5-point dogs. But there are some things going on in this game that could negatively impact Pittsburgh. Among those is the weather. It's looking like there's going to be a lot of rain, which should keep this total low, as the total suggests, at 34.5 points. And when you get a low total game like this, anything can happen. And it sets up Pittsburgh to be disappointed, hopefully, because I need to get Buffalo in there personally, and I would much rather have Pittsburgh lose today and pretty much lock in Buffalo as a playoff advancer. But it's a game where Pittsburgh should win, and they have everything stacked in their favor. And we'll take a look at it here in a second, but make sure to hit the like button on this video. I'm looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video a little bit later on. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm putting up game scripts all the time. I've got one up already for the night game. I did that one first this week. So if you're looking for a showdown analysis of the Houston Texans versus Indianapolis Colts, that's already up on my YouTube page. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also looking to get 400 subscribers by the end of the playoffs. I'm at 340 right now, so I need 60 more subscribers. So appreciate any help getting there. That was my goal for the end of the season. And make sure to sign up for Underdog. I'm running a promo code with Underdog right now, where if you use the promo code SEEK, S-E-E-K, then they will match you up to $100 on your first deposit. And you can do all sorts of cool stuff on Underdog with that extra $100 of free money. If you wanted to do pick'ems, something like that, and do pick'ems on this game, maybe you have some insight on some of the backup players on Baltimore that might do well, or you have some insight on how you think that Pittsburgh is going to attack this game plan that you want to try to cash in on. Underdog is a perfect spot to do that. And if you use the promo code SEEK, then they will match you up to $100 on your first deposit. In addition to that, I have a ton of playoff best ball content going up. And if you use the promo code SEEK, I will hook you up with my playoff best ball rankings. So make sure to do that. Hit me up on Twitter if you sign up at Pumacom and send me a DM, and I'll hook you up with those rankings. But for now, we can start focusing on this game. And, I think it's going to be a very interesting game. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the last time we had Pittsburgh on a showdown was a couple weeks ago, I believe, or maybe a week ago. And I recommended Mason Rudolph because Mason Rudolph was coming in to, at the time, a struggling team. And they were struggling mainly at the quarterback position. And Mason Rudolph was a veteran quarterback coming in, knowing how to read defenses, and he was replacing Mitch Trubisky, who had bombed for a couple weeks in a row, and Kenny Pickett has basically been a bust. So we had the opportunity to come in and look at Mason Rudolph, and I recommended starting him because Mason Rudolph was a guy, that had a little bit of success with Pittsburgh on a few occasions, but ultimately he was he's thought upon negatively by the fantasy community and everything like that. He's most famous for getting hit on the head with his own helmet by Myles Garrett. So he was pretty comically looked at, and I thought it was a good opportunity for us to start a quarterback that was being generally frowned upon, but I felt like with Pittsburgh having the weapons that they have, it would be a good opportunity for us to go with him. And he ended up paying off. He had 20 DraftKings points in that game. We got the win that I was projecting over Cincinnati that week. And the only issue with that game was I recommended Deontay Johnson over George Pickens, and Pickens ended up having a monster game, and that bit me in the ass. But in general, nailed the game script on that one. Just needed to swap out Deontay for Pickens. And this week, I think it's a little bit different. We got a rain situation here in Pittsburgh, and Mason Rudolph, he's played respectably. He's gotten the team to 2 wins in a row against relatively tough opponents, Cincinnati and Seattle. He helped them beat. But this week, I think it's going to be different. I think now that everybody is thinking that Pittsburgh is going to win, this is setting them up for potential upset. I'm not a huge fan of Mason Rudolph this week just because of the weather concerns mainly, but also it's a division opponent in Baltimore that's going to be a tough opponent. And it may seem like a layup with Baltimore resting most of their starters, or if not all of their starters, but this is when teams can be dangerous, when they're being overlooked. And we have a quarterback in Tyler Huntley that has had some success with Baltimore in the past when he's had to come in and fill in for Lamar Jackson. And, I think that the situation with Huntley is going to be an interesting one with this weather also, because they're going to be relying more on the run game, and Huntley is a good rushing quarterback. He's shown some upside in rushing. A couple weeks ago against Seattle, they brought him in a blowout, and he had 4 rushing attempts, only had 8 yards, but shows that he had 7 passing attempts and 4 rushing attempts. So half of his snaps were rushes basically. So Tyler Huntley is a guy who is interesting this week, and I think that he's going to be competitive. I think that Tyler Huntley, he's going to relish this opportunity to start for the Ravens in a year where they're making a Super Bowl run, and the Baltimore Ravens are going to I think they're going to play hard with the backups, even though it would incentivize them, I think, more to lose this game and have Pittsburgh potentially knock out Buffalo out of the playoffs and make the path easier for Baltimore to make it to the Super Bowl. But at the same time, it's a division matchup, and those division matchups are always tricky. Even with the backups playing, I think Pittsburgh is in danger of losing this game to these backups, especially with the weather concerns that are happening. I think that's going to work in Baltimore's favor. They're playing in Baltimore on top of it. So this is a game happening in Baltimore. The fans are going to be out for some red meat of seeing Pittsburgh get eliminated by this team. So they're going to be playing hard. And I like Huntley this week. I like Huntley a lot this week. George Pickens, guy I talked about earlier, not so much on Pickens this week. The Ravens, I think, are going to be able to handle him, but I think that's mainly a weather concern here too, with all the pouring rain that's supposed to be happening in Pittsburgh this week. I think it's better to try to stay away from the deep ball for the Pittsburgh side. So I would not be looking towards George Pickens as having a monster game this week like he has these past couple weeks. Like I said, versus Cincinnati, I blew that call and went with Deontay Johnson. Ended up being Pickens who had the monster game. And, it just bit me in the ass. And I've been recommending Pickens for a large part of the season. And I finally got fed up with him. And then that's, of course, where he ended up going off. Mason Rudolph, covered him. Going to go back down to Gus Edwards, who is sitting. Deontay Johnson. Deontay, I think this would be the week where Deontay is more favored just based on his history with Mason Rudolph. Like Mason Rudolph used to be, or Deontay used to be Mason Rudolph's favorite target. And then, Pickens these last couple weeks has kind of taken that over. But Deontay and Mason Rudolph have a long history together. If I was starting one of these wide receivers, I think it'd be Deontay this week because they're not going to be throwing the ball as deep. I think they're going to be looking to maybe focus more on these short passes. And I think that favors Deontay Johnson over George Pickens a little bit more. So I am kind of thinking that Deontay Johnson would be the wide receiver to target in this matchup. I know I was wrong on that a couple weeks ago, but I'm going to run it back this week and go with Deontay. I think he's going to have more targets than George Pickens with these weather concerns. Naji Harris, I think, is set up for a decent game. Baltimore has been good against the run is the only issue here. Now, Pittsburgh is going to try to focus on this run game today with this bad weather, and they're just going to try to bleed this clock out and win the game against these Baltimore backups. But I think the matchup is not good. I know that Baltimore's resting starters, but it might be a scheme thing that also is the reason why Baltimore's been really good against the run, but they are only allowing 18.6 DraftKings points a game to running backs, and that is among the league worst. So it's a bad matchup for Najee, and it's a bad matchup for Jaylen Warren, but they are going to get a lot of work, I would imagine, tonight, and you're going to want to have exposure to them in just about probably every lineup, considering the weather concerns. I'd probably have at least one Pittsburgh running back in every lineup tonight. Isaiah Likely is going to be on the bench. Warren's the other running back. Warren got 13 attempts last week. He had 4 targets in addition to that, 19.8 DraftKings points. He had 10 the week before that with what's his face? With Najee Harris. Last week he had 27 rushing attempts along with 0 targets. So if you're projecting them to be in the lead, I think Najee would be the guy to roll with that 27 attempts. A couple weeks ago, he had 19 attempts for Cincy. So it seems like he's kind of regaining that, like that starting role from Jaylen Warren. I don't know why exactly. Maybe he's just doing better lately, but yeah, Naji Harris seems like he's going to be the grinder in this offense. So if you like Pittsburgh to be playing with a lead, Najee Harris is your guy. If you like them to be playing from behind, Jaylen Warren is the guy. I also don't hate starting them together in Pittsburgh wins scenarios. Trubisky, McSorley, all these guys we can skip. Beckham is out. Beckham had a ton of incentives for bonuses this week, so he would have been an easy play if he was playing, but looks like he's out, so we're not going to get to see him trying to earn those performance bonuses. Justice Hill, not really sure what to make of the situation with these running backs for Baltimore. Justice Hill, if he plays, I would guess that he's going to get a decent amount of work, but I'm sure with the depth that they have at running back right now, they'd rather just bench him and not have him, like do much tonight. So Justice Hill is a guy that we might want to look to avoid tonight. Let's see what he's getting for a projection real quick here. See if he's even getting projected. I'm going to look at ETR's projection, established runs projection for Justice Hill tonight, just to see if he's getting any type of projected points. I see him at 2.2 projected points. So, yeah, it's probably a situation to avoid Justice Hill tonight. Justin Tucker, going to be in play. It's rainy, so, maybe some stalled out drives when they get closer to field goal range. Rain doesn't necessarily help kickers, but, in a low-scoring game, maybe Justin Tucker kicks a couple 40-yarders. also playing with those backups, maybe less touchdown conversions. So Justin Tucker is a guy to have on the radar. Chris Boswell as well, because obviously they're playing with backup quarterback on top of they're going to take any points they can get against Baltimore. He has 12 DraftKings points the last 2 weeks with Mason Rudolph at the quarterback position. So Chris Boswell is definitely in play tonight. Freiermuth short passes are the game tonight, I think. And Freiermuth has had some success with Mason Rudolph in his one start that he had either last year or the year before that with Freiermuth. Freiermuth was targeted. But I would think that the short game is in play with the weather conditions, and Pat Freiermuth would be set up there. In addition to that, Pittsburgh, Baltimore is bad against the tight end. They're allowing 14 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. On the Baltimore side, Pittsburgh is allowing 13.9 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. In a bad weather matchup, I think tight ends are guys that we want to start. And we know for a fact that Pat Freiermuth is not going to be on the bench this week. So Freiermuth is a guy that we want to be interested in. Ravens D, we want to be interested in the Ravens D as well, because it's going to be a sloppy game. And that's going to set up opportunity for the Ravens defense. It's also going to set up opportunity for the Steelers defense. And both those defenses are relatively cheap. You get the Ravens at 4,200 and the Steelers at 3,800. So I'm interested in both those defenses, given the conditions. Going back to Freiermuth, he had 4 targets last week with Rudolph and 0 against Cincy. So I don't know if he sat that game versus Cincy, but he had no action at all in that game. But last week he had 4 targets for 44 yards. So Freiermuth, I think he's going to have a decent game. Melvin Gordon is the guy that we want for the Ravens running game. The Steelers are allowing 22.9 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. Melvin Gordon won a Super Bowl ring last year with the Kansas City Chiefs. He never played a snap, but they gave him a Super Bowl ring as a practice squad guy. Now he's on the Ravens, and he's been inactive for most of the season. Last week he was an active player. Got 7 DraftKings points, 6 rushing attempts for 10 yards, but he scored a touchdown. I would guess that Melvin Gordon gets a decent amount of work this week. And Melvin Gordon's a guy with a chip on his shoulder. I would look for him to come out and try to make the most of his opportunity this week. And I like Melvin Gordon this week at 3,600. Rashad Bateman might be the one of the few wide receivers to target on the Baltimore side this week at 3,400. I look for him to get a decent amount of work. In the blowout game against Miami, he had 6 targets. In that game where they won handily against San Francisco, he had 4 targets. Jacksonville blowout, he had 6 targets. So he's might be a guy that they bring out when like the backups come out or they're firmly in hand. Even though I know he's a starter, but Rashad Bateman is a guy that could be one of those few. Well, actually, he's not a starter because it's Beckham and Zay Flowers now. So let me double check that. Let's see. Yeah, Bateman's he's a starter, and if he's not a starter, he's borderline starter. So Bateman is one of the few starters I think that is going to get some action tonight. But he's at 3,400. Nelson Agholor, same deal as Bateman. Like him and Bateman, I think are just like these guys that have upside. They can perform if they're given a good amount of opportunity. Agholor had 5 targets the other week. He had 8 DraftKings points. He had 4 targets a couple weeks ago in San Francisco. He had 10 DraftKings points. He had a few good weeks, but I think Agholor is probably one of the guys who's going to get a lot more snaps tonight with the main starters on the bench. Other than that, if we scroll down a little bit here, Cam Hayward. Actually, that's Pittsburgh's backup. Agholor is a guy that might be interesting tonight because even with Isaiah Likely, blowing up recently, Agholor had a touchdown on one target for 19 yards last week. He's had a few weeks where he's gotten targets or whatever, but I would imagine that Agholor is going to be the main tight end tonight. And Agholor is a guy I don't think many people will be on, but the Baltimore scheme favors tight ends, and Agholor, I think, is going to be the main tight end tonight. So Agholor is a guy at $800 that we're going to want on our radars tonight. As far as other backups on Baltimore, this guy Funk, Jake Funk. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Mr. Funk tonight. Don't think that he's going to do much. But you never know with the backups playing. I think Melvin Gordon is the guy that we want, though. This guy Wright is another one of these backup running backs. Not really sure what to make of it there. I would check out Establish the Run for sure to kind of see what the projections on some of these backups are. Let me see if I can get an idea of if any of these backup running backs are going to be worth doing anything with. I think Melvin Gordon is just the main guy to focus in on this week. I don't think we need to go with Wright or Funk tonight. I could end up biting me in the ass. Tylan Wallace is another one of these wide receivers. He had a lot of hype a few years ago going into best ball season and never really did anything with that hype. But he scored if I remember right, last year he had a pretty good return touchdown in one of the games that was a showdown, I think, and ended up being a really good game for him. But Tylan Wallace, I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting work reps as a wide receiver this week, maybe in addition to his other special teams roles. But Tylan Wallace, maybe keep an eye on Tylan Wallace. Beat reporter reports and stuff like that. Tylan Wallace might be interesting at 200. He is questionable, though. Let's see. Wallace, let's see. I don't really see any word on his situation, but he's pressed into duties as the team's return man after two-time Pro Bowler Devin Duvernay exited last Sunday's game with a back injury. That was back on December 11th. Duvernay is still on IR, so Tylan Wallace is still probably going to be the main return guy. But in addition to that, I would guess they're going to get him some work tonight as a wide receiver. But keep him in the player pool. Boykin, not interested in backups for Pittsburgh. Let's look at this guy, Ryan. Sean Ryan has not done anything. The reason I'm looking at these backups is because you never know if you see one of these guys getting targets, then he's going to be interesting on a day where they're going to be focused on their backups. But I think Agholor and Bateman are the guys I'm most interested in. And then I have a little bit of interest in Tylan Wallace for those Baltimore wide receivers, given the receivers should mainly be on the bench this week. But let's look at a build. I'm going to probably lean towards Naji Harris as my captain for this particular build. Let's get these volume guys in here. We'll get Najee in there. Going to put in Deontay just to see where it takes us. On the Baltimore side, I think Melvin Gordon is the main guy. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. I want to get Huntley. At least Huntley on the Baltimore side. We'll look to value for those wide receivers if we need it. I think as far as volume, Mason Rudolph is probably a volume guy that we would be interested in. Jaylen Warren as well. Leaves us, even if we were getting all these volume guys in here, leaves us with 6,600. So we still got a ton that we can do. Kickers. defenses, any one of those are interesting. Freiermuth as well. All those guys are cheap. It shouldn't be any problem. You're going to leave. This is going to be a week where you're leaving salary on the table, I think. If we wanted to put in Huntley as that captain instead and get Najee Harris back in there, leaves us with 5,600, same spot. You're going to be pretty set up with building any way that you want tonight with all these guys on Baltimore that are going to be benched. So you could go Pittsburgh heavy. If I was going with a Pittsburgh lose script, I think we want Huntley as that captain. I think we want maybe one less running back on the Pittsburgh side, because it means that the Ravens D is successful against the run. Going to put in that Ravens defense in there. I got Deontay. I'm going to put in, let's see. I'm going to put in one of these receivers for Baltimore because I think one of these receivers would be having a decent game. And those receivers are $3K for Agholor and $3,400 for Bateman. So maybe one of those guys. Or you could put in Justin Tucker. They give you a 3-3 build with Huntley, Ravens D, and Tucker. Maybe you want to use Kolar. I really like Kolar tonight. He's at 800, but I think he's interesting tonight, or today, I should say. It's going to be tricky building these builds. I think like this is probably not a showdown slate I'm going to go heavy on because it's just going to be a tricky one. Look towards projections on this one. Get yourself projections from Establish the Run or a company like that that specializes in kind of focusing in on these pre-season type of slates where a team's going to be resting most of their starters. But I do think that Baltimore is going to keep this game competitive. My favorite captains are going to be Huntley, going to be maybe Johnson, and then maybe one of those, one of each of those Pittsburgh running backs. I think I'll probably have exposure to each one of those guys in the captain spot. I think with the rain, defenses are going to be in play. Running games are going to be in play. Melvin Gordon is going to be in play, even though I don't have him in this build. If we're doing a Ravens win build, though, let's look at Gordon here. Let's put Gordon in this build. Let's take out Rudolph. That's going to leave us with 14K. We can basically do whatever we want. If I got Huntley, Ravens D, and Melvin Gordon in there, Kolar, Agholor, or Bateman would be a good option. That's going to leave a boatload of salary on the table, though. It's going to leave over 10K on the table. But I think we pretty much got things covered with it. We got Deontay Johnson and Jaylen Warren in there for Pittsburgh. We're going to have Huntley, the main scoring guy on Baltimore, along with Melvin Gordon. Like I would imagine that Huntley and Gordon will account for all the touchdowns on the Ravens, in addition to the Ravens D in a Ravens win build. But for that empty spot to get a 4-2 Ravens build, we could put in like the kicker or one of those other backups, like I suggested. That's going to leave a ton of salary on the table, like I said. But like this is a week where tons of salary is there to be left on the table, with all the expensive starters on Baltimore's side on the bench. So you just got to kind of play around with it. Try to keep an eye on the beat reporters to see which of these backups is going to get a good look tonight. Huntley, obviously, is going to get the volume. Gordon, I think, is going to get the volume. And then I think those other guys I mentioned will get the volume. But, yeah, good luck with the slate. I got the show up already for the night game, which is going to be a much more competitive game, a much more both teams have something at stake. It's a better slate to play. But, we'll dig into these Baltimore guys, too, when I'm doing the 2-game slate, because I'm going to be doing a 2-game slate I'm guessing for that 2-game, most of the action is going to be focused on Houston versus Indy. But I think we're going to get a lot of value with the Baltimore side for, just basically trying to get jamming studs from that Indy Houston game. So that's going to be good to get that value. And with it being a rain game, I don't know how much Steelers exposure I'm going to want if they're all priced up. So I'll dig into that when I start building a lineup in that 2-game slate. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get me up to 400. I'm about 60 off of that. Hit the like button. Looking for 15 likes. I put out a shorter video. And sign up for Underdog using the promo code SEEK. They're going to match you up to $100 on your first deposit on a new account. So make sure you're signing up for Underdog using the promo code SEEK. Hit me up on Twitter. DM me, and I will send you my playoff best ball rankings because it's a really fun game, and you're going to want to check that out. So that's it for this show. I'll be back shortly with that 2-game slate. Thanks, guys.